Hello and welcome to One on One. I'm Glenn Ramadharsingh. I'm very pleased to say my guest today is a guest I haven't had on in a while, but certainly it's wonderful having him on. Minister of the People and Social Development, Dr. Glenn Ramadharsingh.
Hello, how are you?
Very good, and I was just saying before we started that I think one of the very first interviews you did as Minister was here in the studio. Certainly. So much water under the bridge since then, so much in terms of what you've set out to accomplish and what you have accomplished. What are the latest developments in your ministry? I know there's some work being done with the differently able, which I always find particularly important.
Well, the People's Partnership Manifesto promised to bring back the differently abled as equal partners. That's a tremendous pledge. And in trying to fulfill that, we've done several initiatives. At first, because we came in at a time of the CLICO, I have to say disaster, and the AID-CU debacle, we would have been challenged for funds. So to say to give more money to the differently abled directly was not an option that we pursued. But what we tried to do is to create the atmosphere, the environment, a facilitative environment, and create constructive partnerships with all the disability groups in the country and to bring them together. And so we started to work on a center for the differently abled after I visited Alabama with the Volunteers of America, and I saw an empowerment center, and I saw the way that they treated the differently abled. It really inspired me to come to Trinidad and do our own thing. Do you know that every center for the differently able that we have in Trinidad and Tobago are colonial ruins? They're from colonial past. They're gifts that were given to Princess Elizabeth, Lady Ho Choi. I mean, they're great institutions, people get help. But the Trinidad and Tobago government has not done something of its own. And so this center for the differently abled, $11.5 million center in Carson Field, will be the first of about 5 we envisage in different parts of the country. Because I once got a heart-wrenching letter from a taxi driver in Maruga who told me that he had to actually pay off $1,000 because he forego $250 a day for his taxi. Then he had to pay someone to see about his grandparents and his mother and father. And then he had to journey and put gas all the way to Port of Spain to get 1 hour of physiotherapy for his child who was differently able. So that those centers will bring the services closer, not only in Port of Spain, but closer to where people live for differently abled.
No, unfortunately, I guess you have to do it in stages. So the catchment area for the very first center will be huge, I guess, and then you're spreading out to other areas.
And what we envisage, and you know, in the past, this industrialists would have built large buildings when they are successful. Now Microsoft's building is 3 stories, a very small building, because you can have a smart building. So we are looking for this not to be a center for people to physically come in out, but a resource center. So you can go on Skype or on the net and communicate with professionals, and services will be contracted on a needs basis, so you don't have to have a lot of staff. So we are looking at that design where we can communicate a person with a particularly complex disability would be online talking to experts in university hospitals throughout the world, London, New York, Japan. So you have that kind of facility where you have world-class treatment and world-class professionals being engaged. This is the vision.
So it's interesting that you're leveraging IT technology and the internet in particular to sort of allow people who are differently able access to things they wouldn't have had access to before. But I guess that means your ministry has to tie in with other ministries now to ensure that these people have access.
It is because we are, I mean, admittedly, we are quite far behind in our treatment, and it has to do with our laws. Our laws, we are working on that. Indeed, tomorrow we go to a seminar with the Bureau of Standards where we are talking about standards, signage, the way, the dimensions for doorways to make places more accessible, that the government can begin to contemplate policy in terms of making standard operating procedures in offices for the differently abled. And so we have a long way to go, because the laws in foreign countries and first world countries, indeed, it's legislated that you cannot discriminate against the differently abled. They have, and in parts of Latin America, there are countries that have actual social justice written in specific words in the Constitution to which they can rely. We don't have those rights here in that way, and therefore we are working towards that. But while we do that work, we must get the learnings from the first world countries on some of these, the ways to treat the differently abled.
I mean, it brings up 2 aspects as well, one of which is transport for the differently able, because No, even if you're using e-services, they still need to go to things like hospitals, they still need
But
to go
you would
shopping,
have seen
things like
that.
that.
We brought in 24 buses for the differently able.
And I know you'd mentioned that a while back.
Yes, that was one of our dreams
right
that
now.
has come true. Eldamo, which is the elderly differently able mobile. That vision was first for the elderly alone. It was Elmo. And I said, no, all differently able need transport and we need to get into that project. And we went to cabinet and I argued the case that the people in social development ministry must chair the committee that spearheads the pilot project. And indeed we are doing that because the PTSC is a corporation. And when the economy tightens and things get hard, the first thing that they do is get rid of the buses for the differently able and get down back to their core business of moving masses of people from Port of Spain.
It is more expensive.
Because it is more expensive and it takes a lot more money because one bus is just moving 3 persons.
It's more difficult to get the person on and off.
So that but if you establish priorities, then you do it at a cost, at an economic cost, because you want to provide a particular benefit to challenged members of society. And the Eldamo project is a flagship project, but it is also a pilot for 6 months, after which we will assess and re-engineer the program. But it's working fantastic and people are highly appreciating it. In Port of Spain, you can call and dial a ride, but in parts of Trinidad and Tobago, you could have never done that. And it's really a devolution of a service that was available because of the Rotary Club in Port of Spain. And we've put the Rotary Club, who has had the experience over the last 8 years of running the service, on the board. So we have the private sector partnership.
Well, that's a major leap forward, isn't it? Because quite often you hear people saying that NGOs are so much better capable of delivering services sometimes and know the ways of doing it.
That's why we have made them part of the committee. Right. And they enjoy doing the work because here it is, they can do 24 times what they had committed to do. So when they make their annual speeches now, they can say that they are part of the Eldamo project. They're on the board.
So you would count that as one of your successes as minister then?
Certainly it is one of our successes, and it's something that, it's something that really multiplied tenfold. I didn't expect it to be rolled out and received so well by the population.
In terms of access to buildings, that's always been a problem for the differently able in this country, and even for government buildings. Sometimes you'll see at the court, people have to be taken through the basement to get in.
Certainly.
Is that something that, are we going to legislate officially that new buildings have to have certain
It goes to the heart of our policy making, and in many instances, we are not the landlords of the building. The government doesn't own the building, they're leasing, renting. And so to make structural changes, you have to go back to the contract. There's a lot of work to do. It will take some time, but we begin speaking about it tomorrow. Indeed, with the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards, the consortium of the disability organizations, we have a conference tomorrow where that is actually on the agenda. So this is timely.
In terms of the work that you do, I mean, you've got fundamentally 2 ministries. One ministry by itself, social development, is one of the most headache-inducing ministries because it covers such a wide area. Do you find yourself sort of pressed to try and keep up with all the various things that I know you must have set out for yourself to do and to accomplish?
Well, yes, but we have good people and strong policy makers and strong decision makers, and we continue to try to attract talent. Yes, with better people and with more passionate people, we can do more. But to say that there's any particular challenge, I think we confront them, and we have regular meetings in the ministry. We have a heads of department ministry that is meeting that is phenomenal. We have a lot of engagement. We have a lot of excitement. Right now, the country, local government is doing an emergency drill in case there was a tsunami.
The tsunami, yeah.
Ministry is, we keep getting texts, baby. We're on the ball with it. So we enjoy the work that we do. According to Geppetto, a man who made toys, and we interviewed him at 94 years old, said, "Why are you still working?" And he said, "Me? I've never worked a day in my life. I enjoy what I do."
So once you love what you do, although you have another passion, of course, which is veterinary science, but we won't talk about. In terms of poverty alleviation, I know that was one of the things that you really set out to work on, and you set a benchmark for yourself.
Of course.
How have you been achieving that benchmark?
We increased the audience of the ministry from 3,000 in January of 2010 to June of 2010, from 3,000 persons walking in to, from June 2010 to December of 2010, to 12,000 persons. The next year we interacted with 30,000. The 2013, 50,000. So it's been phenomenal. And the last household and budgetary survey puts the poverty level as having dropped from 24% to 17.4%. And that's from the Ministry of Planning. and sustainable development. So that's a landmark achievement.
And that's in keeping with your benchmark
I
for
remember,
yourself?
of course. I think we've far exceeded it. I remember having become the minister, you would open the newspapers and you would see for 3-4 pages a mother crying out for help for 3 persons, a father of 2 persons. You still see them. But if you take your mind back to 2010, you certainly will see that the number of cases have been reduced, because we've been partnering aggressively with the media where they go to, because the media said, hey, look, I have somebody here. And we'll talk about that, pension checks.
Yes,
that was another thing that's
on my list.
List. And you know, you remember those days, and now it's far reduced, and there's a lot to do, because there's a lot. As you go, poverty reduction is something that is ongoing, and it is something that you cannot really totally eliminate. But certainly we've gotten a lot of strides in our step in that direction.
I would suppose that some of your successes also present a challenge, in that as you become more aggressive in dealing with poverty and helping those who are unfortunate, it would seem to me, once people realize that help is being offered, that you probably get a snowball effect of people coming in more and more. People who might never have thought of applying to the government for assistance for certain things, suddenly coming in. So you're creating demand yourself, aren't you?
Correct. And while it was important for us to do the outreach exercises, because now UNESCO, the World Health Organization, they are saying go out into the communities. Government policies and programs don't reach the people. The resources don't reach where it is needed. Go out and interact with the public. Don't depend only on the TV and the radio and the newspapers. Many people don't read. And the thing is that, yes, in the first instance, we did not meet those persons, because we met a lot of people who were just yearning for help, who were just calling out and didn't even know how to get help. But now that people know the procedures, they know the policies, the programs, we do have errant persons trying to just get a food card. Somebody just feel that they deserve a grant, and that's where we're changing the focus now. Everything in the ministry, the mantra is now empowerment, self-sustaining livelihood, independence. So that while it was important to the ambulatory work, go out and give
to let people know that services are offered.
It was important. We are shifting gears as well in social development, and everyone we see as a potential productive, constructive worker who could work and earn a living. That's how we see them. And we say, what does it take you to get there? What do you need? Do you need a birth certificate? Do you need an ID card? Do you need a little food card? Big to get there.
So help getting over the hump.
That's it.
Right.
So we position you as if you have to be on your feet. Because I met a young lady. I went into one of the buildings at the Hyatt, and I asked the receptionist, I said, I'm going up to see the Minister of Energy. And she said, no problem. And she had one hand. And she said, you don't remember me? I said, no. She said, I met you at an outreach and I asked you for a grant and a food card and so on. And you told me to come and see you to get a job, and you gave me a letter. Today that young lady is working through the Ministry of Labor as a receptionist in that building. And that is what we want to see. We want to see a constructive, productive member of society. If we could get you to that, we will. If not, we will help. We will help you and sustain you and keep you. But the real aim is to get you there. That's how we envision it, and that's how we would like to approach every single client.
Now, watch a good segue here. Now, of course, some people aren't working, and those will be people who are pensioners in one case.
Sure.
And that's always been a headache for people, hasn't it, for those who are pensioners, because there's the worry about trying to get your check in time, and the worry of cashing the check, etc., etc. Now, you have obviously listened to some of those concerns, and you've developed now a direct, which has been talked about for a long time, direct deposit concept.
Yes.
How is that coming along?
Well,
given the fact that old people tend not to trust anything that they can't see in their hands.
Oh, well, that's something that we are dealing with. What had happened is that you would remember, because I think you probably even called in a few cases where pensioners lose their checks. Because of the law to prevent fraud, it's an archaic law, but you cannot get back that check for 6 months, because there's the possibility that somebody can encash it. And that's a real possibility, because people give it to grocers and grocers give them groceries. And sometimes it's not their check. And so you lose that money and you have to wait 6 months. So we said no. When we increased it to 3,000, I took the opportunity and got it into the finance bill that they only have to wait 1 month. And then we started to think, well, why even do they have to wait 1 month? Because 1 month, pensioner waiting for that 3,000 to pay rent, to buy food, and to pay for his grandchild to go to school. he can't wait a month. He's in a real position. And I said, why can't we put this in the people's account? And we had a public service crisis because the permanent secretary was not sure, the director of social welfare, they called people from finance. And after many meetings, because we met every day for once a week on this matter. After about 2 months, I said, look, I have heard all of these submissions. Show me the law that prevents us from putting this money in the pensions account. And with that question, they were unable to do so. And I said, well, let's go for it. And they said it would take 18 months because we had 4 phases. First of all, registration, then verification, then they work with the bank, then we have to go and sign a contract with the pensioner. And I said, look, I'm willing to wait 18 months to get this thing done. And today we have it. Out of our 81,623 pensioners, 46,280 are now on direct deposit. They are receiving, there's no check anymore for 46,000 persons. And we are moving within the next 3 months to bring that figure to close to 60,000.
I mean, there'll be some pensioners who don't have bank accounts, for example.
Right, and there are those that are very precarious still.
Right.
And there are some who, that check is an out-in. It's the
to get out the house to go collect the check, right?
Meet their friend from from the village and the bank, and it's an opportunity to dress up. We wouldn't want to take that away from some of them.
But that's still a major achievement because I mean the fact is, it's not just the fact that you've increased safety by having people not have to walk around with a check in their hand and made it more efficient. But that efficiency means you're actually reducing staffing requirements as well.
I don't know if people understand how significant a breakthrough is that, unless you were in the media or you were in social welfare. But it certainly it decreases stress and pain and suffering for a lot of our elderly persons.
It also decreases strain, pain and suffering on the system as well.
On the system, because the social welfare would have to be, I'm sorry, we can't do anything. And they begin to dislike the social welfare officer. But the social welfare officer was just following the law. An oppressive law it was, I must say, but it's changed now.
But it means you can turn those resources to other more productive means.
Of course, and I mean, it creates more economic activity because the banking sector is now involved in an activity where, for example, a person who changes that check, they take the 3,000 and go. Now you have a little interest charge, you have other facilities that they can engage the senior citizens to make their life easier. I mean, they can even do internet banking in some cases.
In very few cases,
I suspect, but that's something we could work on.
And given the fact that your ministry obviously helps those who are the weakest in our society quite often, and I want to ask you about that if we have time towards the end. But in terms of the homeless problem in Trinidad and Tobago, I mean, every government around the world has to deal with the homeless. And in this country, we seem to have had a pretty poor track record over the years because of either an unwillingness or a lack of knowledge on how to confront the issue. I know you've been dealing with it head on.
Well, you see, when I got in, it was really with the Ministry of Planning. And I had several meetings with them. And at that time, there was Senator Mary King. And then Mr. Tiwari, Dr. Tiwari, the minister, is now there. And I always felt that planning was well placed to deal with it. But the difficulty comes with to bring all the ministries together. And for example, you would have a street dweller and you engage him and you have to hold him to wait on the mental health officer.
Right.
So the mental health officer is busy. And then you say, okay, well, we need the police now because legally we can't take him down to any facility because, we don't have the law on our side. And they say, all right, let's call the police. And then say, this is inhumane. We should have a medical social worker to ask this person, or we should do some preliminary medical work on him, check and see if his pressure is good. Next thing you know, this guy is not in good health. So what we did, we confronted, we had a task force, we worked on recommendations, we brought in the vision and a mission, the Transform Life, all the mayors, all the religious groups that were involved in the thing. We spoke, we talked, and we had an exercise in 2012 where we took up 36 persons and got them off the streets. And then we said, you know what, we can do this thing, but we need the agency. So we created the interagency unit where we have members of the police, medical social workers, psychosocial support workers. We have the mental health officers from the Ministry of Health in the unit. So we had people in the unit, and that unit got to work only in November. And in the last year, we've been able to intervene in the lives of 120 persons. And today, 18 of them are being targeted to go to the next level. They've received their birth certificate and they're undergoing rehabilitative training at the Transform Life Ministries. from where we are going to send them very soon to a 6 months intensive training program, which will see them developing skills in art, music, craft, basic alphanumeric skills, and also foreign languages. Things, a unique blend of courses and uplifting engagements that we want to try to bring. If we can get one university graduate out of that pool of persons, if we could get one social worker, one food card liaison officer, we'd be very happy.
I guess it's a very complex problem, as many governments around the world have discovered, because people are on the streets for various reasons.
Well,
could be mental problems, drug problems, poverty, any number of things.
That we did visit some models in Chicago, in Miami, in Chile. We did send our people on trips to gain information. The best model we found is in Miami, the Chapman brothers, and we are kind of following that model, where we are going, at some point in time, Port of Spain is going to be divided into zones, and there will be NGOs responsible for zones together with the IAU. So it's a private-public partnership that we are going for.
Well, again, that's heartening, because I mean, I guess sometimes government has to recognize NGOs handle things better.
Government has its limitations. I mean, your public officer after 4, I mean, that's it's not the run of the mill. You know, you have officers who work all night and all day, but they are not regulated to so to do. So that's where the NGOs come in. The passion, you can't pay for that. The drive, and there's a tremendous amount of talent in the private sector.
Yeah, that has not made itself available. From Living Water on, and they deal with the homeless a lot.
Oh, yeah.
They have 30 years of experience with that.
People do tremendous work in the country, and that's how we found Transform Life, Vision on a Mission, and indeed the religious organizations. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, it is that spiritual, the teachings, the church, the temple, the mosque that keep these people, sustain them on a day-to-day basis.
You mentioned the fact that you've picked up a model from Miami to deal with this problem.
Sure.
And I was talking to you before the interview, and I was wondering, you must have to do a lot of, I mean, let's not even talk about domestic travel, because I can't turn on our TV or be in our newsroom without seeing you in some far-flung part of the country every given day. But it must be really helpful for you as minister to go and actually physically see examples of social development work being done.
Well, I did travel, and with respect to the work with the differently abled and the People's Ministry. So we have to split up the travel. Minister Douglas, when he was with us, he went to the Chicago model, and Minister Vanilla Allen went to the Chile and the Miami. But they brought back the learning, and that's the important thing. So I do go to some, but I do share it with my ministerial colleague, who is very much involved in the work. And this training program, she'll be heavily involved in it for the street dwellers, former street dwellers.
And in terms of domestic traveling, the direct effect has been, by what I gather, very successful. But it means that you're on the road an awful lot.
We respond. MPs have issues, NGOs, community groups, they call us. We've been where we needed to be, and I can hardly say.
It's not every government program where you see the minister actually being present when something is being done, and you seem to have made that a policy of yours.
Oh yes, we think that the front line is the bottom line, and if we are not at the front of what we are doing, then we're not doing it at all, and that's how we approach it. It is very challenging, but we get by, and we are building systems, and this is the thing. We are building systems, and we are doing the political engineering that creates a system where the minister does not have to be there. But in the building process, the minister must be there. And that's what we've done, and we've laid the platform for great work. So now that direct impacts can take place on their own. Indeed, we've had direct effect. The minister went to Tobago, Minister Vanilla Allen Toppin, and led a team. I mean, I was not there all the time. I went to the launch and I went to the delivery. And this is what we want. We want the ministry to be so engineered as to deliver to the people in this innovative way.
But I guess for the last couple of years, you've wanted the people in various communities to also see the fact that the minister is actually present and has a vested interest. The fact that you do go, I mean, you do go and actually examine cases where people have a particular problem, that seems to be important to you.
You see, being out there and being involved informs you so much, so as to craft policies and to reconfigure things in the ministry that are not working. There's so many things sometimes in the public service that is not working. I mean, people generate a report for you, and that's what it is. It's just a report. It's no recommendations, no action taken. What's the way forward? And this is when you go there, you listen to the people. The people guide you. Sometimes they do it in a little boisterous manner, and sometimes they are hurt and they're pain. But the voice of the people, as the Prime Minister says, is the voice of God. And you listen to those voices and you inform yourself as to what you could do different and what you could do better. And you work with your technical team to translate the voices of concern and passion into the voices of, into action, into things that can be done, specific things that need to be done to do things in a different way.
Now, you're one of the younger ministers, as far as I know. You look like one of the younger ministers. And therefore, I guess there must be a level of idealism as well with you. You want to achieve things. You want to sort of achieve the dreams that you have for the Trinidad and Tobago. But you must feel overwhelmed at times because of some of the horror stories you have to listen to as minister in terms of people's lives and what they have to deal with. Well, how do you cope with that?
Well, it came with the acceptance of the ministry. When I saw the Prime Minister promise the Ministry of the People, I saw that on the Newsday, Ministry of the People. I remember the day I saw that. And we were indeed in the opposition. Mm-hmm. And I picked up the Newsday and I walked off and I said, I wonder which man or woman is going to have to do that.
Which poor guy.
Yes. And indeed, when I realized that I would have to do the task, it was a whole reawakening. And it meant that anything that the people are interested in, we will have to find a way to work with them to do it. So listening to the horror stories, seeing some of the terrible things, experiencing what can only be defined as some of the most novel events, that one can experience, is part of this whole process of building, keeping this vision. The people, I think, called on the Prime Minister to create a ministry like this. Because they would say, and it happens, people they have a problem with their TNTech, and they go to TNTech, and they say, no, you ought to go to the Public Utilities Ministry. You go to the Public Utilities, say, that's a TNTech matter, what are you doing here? No, you have to go to the Regulated Industries Commission. You go on to the Ombudsman, and after you went 6 days, you say, look, I give up. And so they wanted a place that they could go to and speak to a matter that they were not sure where to go, and get some form of resolution, get some form of information and direction on a particular matter. And as long as we continue to do that, in all the complicated and scientific methods that we will employ to do that, I think this is what the people had wanted.
Well, we're out of time, Minister. I know it's shocking, but I have to tell you and thank you once again, because between you and your PRO, Roshan, who's also in the studio here, whenever anybody has called us here at the station and I've called for your intervention to help, you've never once hesitated, so I thank you very much for that.
Thank you graciously for your time.
And thank you for being on the program.
It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been watching One-on-One. Join us again tomorrow for another edition.